Representative Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. On March 21st, 2025, the State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Romea Osturk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Osturk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Osturk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the—
Hey, Patriots. Welcome back to Conservative Chronicle. If you thought the radical left couldn't get any more unhinged, just wait until you see the fireworks in this latest congressional hearing. Representative Pramila Jayapal went head-to-head with Secretary Marco Rubio over the revocation of a student visa. And folks, it was a showdown that proves exactly why we must keep standing strong for national security and the rule of law. Let's break it down. There it is, the classic liberal line. But what about the First Amendment? Let me tell you something foreign nationals don't get U.S. constitutional rights just because they're standing on our soil. A student visa is not a birthright, it's a privilege. And if you're here stirring up trouble, that privilege ends. Period.
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, but that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Osturk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Osturk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr.
while I
Secretary,
have the authority, I will
clear.
continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says. And that means that you are trumping the legal Supreme Court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country
Rubio,
apart.
I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job who snatches her off the street.
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked? Is that
that law student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed.
Well,
She
that's
wrote
what
an
you
op-ed,
claim.
and I'm talking to you about her
That's her
particular
lawyer's
case.
claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa
Yes,
because
proudly.
she wrote an op-ed.
And
Would
we'll
you
do more. We're
revoke?
gonna do more of
I
them.
have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest
Are
who's
you
here to stir up
going to
trouble.
revoke the visa of somebody who made
Send me
that?
the case,
that,
I'll look at it.
that
I'm
statement?
looking to get crazy people out of
actually,
our
it's not
country.
just about revoking.
Forward
You
to
actually,
revoking the visas
Secretary
of any
Rubio,
lunatics you
excuse
can
me,
identify.
reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You granted that person
That's
to
a
enter
totally
the United
different process.
States.
That's someone that applied here through a totally different process.
Secretary Rubio,
visas are a privilege.
Secretary
we deny
Rubio,
them all the time, and
you
we'll revoke
revoked
them.
a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for
Gentlelady's time
masked
has
men
expired.
to
That's your
snatch
claim. That's
somebody off
accurate. That's
the
your claim.
street.
Your time
That's your
has
claim.
expired.
That's your claim. That's not accurate.
Recognized ranking.
Romea Osturk, a Turkish grad student, wrote an op-ed, and the State Department, under Rubio's authority, revoked her visa. You know why? Because we don't need foreign activists using our universities as political battlegrounds. We've got enough chaos without importing more. Dictator? Really, Pramila? Let's get something straight. The Secretary of State has a legal authority given by Congress itself to revoke visas if someone poses a threat. Not just bombs and guns, but subversion, unrest, extremism. You don't get to come here and use our freedoms to undermine our country. That's not how this works. And then she goes after law enforcement for using masks. First, she says we're in danger because of armed agents detaining someone. Then she complains that they're wearing masks to protect their identity? These aren't cartoon villains. Folks, they're federal officers doing their job in an era where cops are constantly targeted, doxxed, and attacked by radical activists. You don't get to cry about the masks when your side spent years vilifying the police. Oh, and then she tries to play the race card, bringing up some white guy from South Africa who allegedly said something awful. Let's be clear, that's apples and oranges. Every case is different. That refugee went through a completely separate process. But see how the left operates? When they're losing the argument, they pull the race lever. Every single time. That's what leadership looks like. Rubio stood firm. He didn't buckle under the screaming and interruptions. He said flat out, I will continue to revoke the visas of people who come here to tear this country apart. That's exactly the backbone we need. Because make no mistake, folks, this isn't just about one student. It's about whether we're going to let global agitators exploit our openness or whether we're going to protect our homeland. You know what gets me? The left has no problem with weaponizing the government when it suits their agenda. They'll sick the IRS on conservatives. They'll censor speech online. But the second a conservative takes legitimate legal action to defend this country, they cry authoritarianism. It's hypocrisy, and we see right through it. This isn't about fear. It's about sovereignty, about putting America first. If you're here on a visa and you abuse that privilege, even with words, you should expect consequences. Because freedom isn't free, and it's not open season for every foreign activist who wants to use our institutions as a platform for their ideology. So to Marco Rubio, I say this, keep going. Stand your ground. And to the patriots watching, keep your eyes open. The battle for this country isn't just at the border. It's on campus. It's in Congress. And it's in every one of these hearings. This is Conservative Chronicle. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. And remember, our laws are not up for debate.